Whenever I come home from a hard day's work, this mushroom is a perfect representation of what happens when I take my boots off. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, I am SocioPsycho and this is Mob Reviews, and today we are going to review Second Chance Heroes. This is a action heavy co-op based game in a shoot 'em up style created by Rocket City Studios. Is it any good? Well, let's find out. And we'll start by going into the options menu. Now, display, full screen aspect ratio, and screen resolutions. There's not a huge variable in the screen resolutions options, but I've never had an issue with the settings to get it full screen or in the screen resolutions at any time. I've never had an issue in the performance either. It's ran at 60 frames per second with no tearing, no clipping, and no crashing whatsoever. I have not suffered from any performance issues in the game. As you can see, there are other options quite available to you. And when we go to controls, all the key rebindings are very easy to rebind with no issues whatsoever, so that is definitely beautiful to see. In the audio, you have different sound sliders, which is always lovely to see and always welcome, and they have a little bit more, as this does have a co-op option in the game. It does have a sound device and a push-to-talk option integrated into the game. So if you're playing for your friends, you don't need to worry about a third-party software such as Ventrilo or TeamSpeak or whatnot. You get the idea. Now, the music in the game is done well, but it's not anything that really raises you up as a battle is raging onward and forward and crashing through the hordes of enemies. It's decent, but it doesn't really propel a sense of epicness, and the same thing can be said about the voice acting. The story is comedic at best, and it takes a sort of comic book feel and reference in how the game looks graphically and how they tie the audio together, so kudos for having synchronicity in that aspect, but it just feels a little bit too corny in some areas, or cheesy, but that could just be my personal opinion. I'll let you get the feel for that in a moment here. Now, the game does have a multiplayer option, as well as I said, it is a heavy co-op option game. I have not been able to get into a game in a multiplayer aspect, most likely because not many people are playing the game. So your best bet really, if you want to play this game with other people, is to do it in a co-op fashion. So let us jump into the single player campaign and show you the bit of a layout first, as there is plenty to talk about when we begin. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the different characters that you'll have the availability to play as, or heroes as they are so well known or called in this game. Now, when you click on these different characters, you can see a simple lore, their base attack, as well as their special attack and their hero statistics. The different characters do play quite differently overall, whether it be a more ranged unit or a melee unit. They have their own styles of attacks that do not correlate with each other. Now, how the game has been built is so that there are support classes and there are more frontline troops. When playing with other people, when playing in a team environment, this is really helpful to have the damage spread out among a team, or have different abilities that are all synchronizing well with each other to sort of give this atmosphere of, hey, we're all doing our part in a small way. The problem, to a point, is if you're not playing in co-op, your options or capability to play certain characters is greatly limited by how weak they potentially are in the lineup, due to the fact that the enemy still comes out in a great number or the bosses hit you in a great fashion. So skill does take a precedence to a certain degree to allow you to get past some of these issues, but even then the sheer number or the different types of creatures can become a real hassle. Now, there may be ways around this when we go into relics. As you progress through the story and as you unlock more characters and progress in the game is completed, different items will become available for you to carry on your journey. Now you cannot carry too many items, and we'll show you the load up screen shortly. But as you can see, the different items do different things, whether it be a bomb from a cake, or a knockback, a hat that makes enemies forget you're there for a moment, which is very helpful if you're playing perhaps a weaker class or something, and you know that a huge amount of enemies are going to spawn in, and the best way to thin their herd before they decimate you is to go invisible and then pick some of them off before they have the upper advantage upon you. So they do have variety in what you're allowed to take into combat with you, which is very nice. Now, when it comes to the levels themselves in the selection, there are a lot of levels, and each level has different goals. Now you can see as I'm scrolling through this list, some will say all goals completed, no goals completed, or number of goals out of 3 completed. What the goals are is sort of separate from achievements, as they give you an in-game XP bonus and a reward tier system style to actually find or complete a specific task in the game, whether it be completing the level in a time allotment, or finding hidden items, or killing certain creatures. There are different variables upon the secondary goals that they want you to do, and it allows you, or gives you the opportunity perhaps, to just get that little extra bit of challenge in, and that little extra bit of XP as a reward for your challenge, which is nice. Now when you do have a party, you have up to 4 slots available for your party, and you have a normal playthrough and a hardcore playthrough. Hardcore is if you die on that mission, you're dead, you can't be revived. There are ways while playing in co-op fashion that if you should die, you'll still have the possibility to be resurrected, but on hardcore, if you die during that mission, your character's dead. In your character loadout screen though, they give you the availability to swap and take into combat 2 heroes. So you can change the heroes you have from the heroes you have unlocked before you go into combat. So you can sort of get the units that you have the most upgraded or feel the most comfortable with. As you can see the rest of the party, and it's very easy in the interface with no issues whatsoever in navigating or understanding where you're going in the game. When we go into the upgrading of the characters, now as you can see here, the upgrade attack for final tier will cost 40,000 experience, and you gain experience as you go through the level. Experience drops from items and monsters that you slay. As you can see, the hero stats are all available. So let's get this maximum upgrade, and we can always take it back because we haven't finalized, and we can see our DPS is 85, and that will give us a total of plus 20. So let's go ahead and do that, and you can see here, so if we go back in, now our DPS is 105. So that's definitely quite the increase in damage, and in a team mentality will definitely be more useful. Depending on what character you decide to play, your stats are going to be different. A melee class, which is more geared to a tank style or stance, is going to have more defense and health. So it's really up to you how you play, as well as the fact that you can customize what relics you take into battle, which do run on a cooldown, but once those cooldowns are up, then you can use them again. There is no, you can only use these items once per mission. Pretty simple, straightforward, and easy. As you progress through the game, as you can see, the interface is very easy to use as well. You have the tab which will switch in between the different characters. Number 1 through 3 will be the relics that you took. You can have the health and the mana which you used. The combat is not all that difficult, as it is the shoot 'em up-esque style, and as everything dies, experience orbs do drop. Now occasionally special items will also drop, or healing orbs. Now the first thing to talk about is level design in the game, as the level design is actually done quite well, and very impressively. There will be perhaps different paths as you progress through the story, and this will play into the secondary objectives. If a secondary objective is, say, gather up 5 hidden scrolls, and as you progress through the story there are different paths that deviate from the end boss. this will add onto your time structure, so it does enforce a sort of replayability or an increase in speed based on your character's knowledge of the map or skill. The level design goes beyond that though, in between just adding different parts of a map which are optional in your explorational capability. There are plenty of traps and integrated items which will harm you, such as turrets which will spit out bombs and blow up if they touch you or get near you. And there's this whole feeling of sort of dread. Now there are some objects which can be used against the enemy, and while that is always nice to see, whether it be a sort of lawnmower type machine which tears up and through the enemy, the level design in this game is done actually quite well. There was no point in the game during the level design which I felt like, oh, I just went down this entire pathway and now I have to go all the way back on this optional explorational part of the map. It does a very good job of tying back in as a loop, or using a trampoline style mechanic where it will fling you back to a more recent position and you can continue down your path. I had never felt as if my time was being wasted or was being frustrated and the game was trying to drag on and pretend to be more than it was, and that's really important to note. The level design went hand in hand with the mechanics, and it never felt as if the game was trying to cheat me or say, oh well, if we make the game longer then you'll play longer and it will look better for us because then we can say we have more content in the game. That was never the case or an issue in regards to this game, and the only issue that I do have when it comes to sort of feeling downplayed is the reusage of the enemy mechanics or visualization of the enemy. There is not all that large of variables when it comes to the enemy. Now as you do progress through the missions and through the maps, it does vary up to a point. But what I'm talking about is not the fodder that you continuously destroy. It's to be expected if you're killing 500 zombies that you're going to have some overlap, and that's perfectly fine. What's a little bit annoying is the fact that there are mini bosses on different levels which continue to come back and fight you again and again, even though you already defeated them before. This could be a magician or a burglar or a cat lady, some variational monster which you've already dealt with in the past, and to continuously see them again takes away from the progressional feel, and that is a really unfortunate aspect to have. The creatures in the game are done nice and they do feel balanced and well thought out in how they are able to either annoy you because of their numbers or their specific ability, whether it be a pair of legs that is able to wrap its intestines around you and drag you across the map, sort of a pull you over to it mechanic, which can be annoying and even deadly at times. It just comes down to a reusage of certain mini-bosses which take away from the overall enjoyment and the explorational aspect, because it's like, well, what's the point? I already killed you, come on. Give me something fresh or new. Let me see something innovative. And that creature repetitiveness takes away from the story element. Now the game is not story heavy or really story reliant in getting people to buy the game. It has a base story which is told in sort of a comic book-esque fashion as it stays in the atmosphere of the game, which is really nicely done. But when you continuously have to have a repeat or a rewash, it gets a little bit annoying, and the story, while it may be entertaining to a point, it's not good enough to make up for any shortcomings or repetitiveness in other areas of the game to really make or allow the game to stand out on its own. The story gets by for what it is, but it's not going to be anything that really drives the player through the game on its own. And I'll let you see some of that now, and I'll let you hear the dialogue for yourself so you can make that decision upon how well or bad it is. As I really found no issue in the voicing of itself, although it wasn't something that I would want to listen to if the game was an RPG, but fortunately the game is not an RPG, so it doesn't have to worry about that, so here you can hear for yourself.
Thing like it owed you money, but before it disappeared, it took one last swipe at the ground. The hole it punched in the floor revealed a whole city, deep beneath the mall. It's the Hobo Kingdom. hidden away from the prying eyes of the world for generations. The hobos are led by King Gladrags, who says he'll let us pass through his kingdom if we do him some favors.
But it is nice to see that the character has these sort of power-ups or upgrade capabilities within the game. There are a lot more than I'll be able to show you at times, and most of them are developed for the game in a co-op fashion. The game's co-op fashion is really the heavy and strong point of the game. There will be ability pickups that you can pick up, and you'll have the availability to use it, whether it be a heal, which will heal everybody in the party, or a speed increase, which will give everybody a temporary speed increase, or perhaps something just more combat basic for yourself, such as an increase in your damage, or a special attack, a ring of fire. There are many different variables, and some that are actually very well done or entertaining and enjoyable to use, as the combat does feel heavy. The abilities and the combat do tie well into each other. The main thing that takes away from the combat is really the lack of innovation in the combat. Yes, is it good for what it does? Yeah, it gets by, but when you play by yourself, it gets very repetitive in a rather alarming rate. The mechanics upon what you have to face in between how powerful your single character is does get rather repetitive fairly fast. Now if it's combined with another player, then you have more of a social aspect and two characters which kind of play off each other in the sharing of damage and increase in DPS. And this sort of dull aspect to the combat system can be soothed over to a point with the social element of a co-op play, but standing on its own suffers from a real tedious repetitiveness issue. So at the end of the day, would I recommend this game? Well, that's a difficult question because it depends upon how you're deciding to play this game. If you're interested in playing this game as a solo player because the concept and idea intrigues you, then perhaps not, or get it while it's on sale. Now that doesn't mean the game is necessarily bad or has any issues that make the playability of the game not available. That's not the case. The unfortunate aspect just comes down to the fact that while the game may run in a performance manner and the combat may be smooth for what it is, as well as the base story to tie things together is perfectly fine, the combat system itself, as well as how the enemies that you face, the balance within it, and the balance within the character you face is more created for you to play with other people. So the game does not truly shine if you play it by yourself. The social aspect of the game will allow you a bit more enjoyment from it, and unfortunately I feel the game sort of perhaps went too heavy in that front. They created a game with the reliance of a social atmosphere maybe just a little too much, as it is a bit difficult to find enjoyment in the game in a single player fashion for a long period of time. The game does eventually start to feel repetitiveness due to the very limitational aspects of what your character is available to do. And while yes, you can play as different characters, the upgrade system as you progress through the story will kind of hold you back from that in the same option. The upgrade system in the game is done very well in a co-op and multiplayer fashion because you build the character you want to play as, you build the character that you have fun with. It's either that insane high DPS, or maybe that support heal, or that tank class, or whatever variation of class that you enjoy playing. You have the upgrades, whether it be in health or damage, to give you that edge as the game progresses forward and monsters and bosses get a little harder. So to continuously switch in between the different types of heroes as you progress forward throughout the game puts you at a severe disadvantage, and while this may be good in a difficulty standpoint, the game is already quite difficult as it is more balanced for a co-op fashion rather than a single player fashion. That doesn't mean that it's impossible to play in a single player fashion, but it means that you're going to hit a skill wall before you hit anything else rather fast. Yes, you will need certain upgrades to get past different areas as you progress through the levels. But the skill wall that the personal player has to have is going to be hit a lot faster because the game is reliant, like I said, more on a co-op fashion than anything else. So yes, for a co-op option or fashion, I can recommend the game because it does have an interesting and integrating story and combat system which is propelled and supported by a multi-hero system. But when you play by yourself, it kind of falls short and it gets very repetitive fast because the combat system is very basic and it doesn't have any real depth. So ladies and gentlemen, picking this game up as a single player option, if it's on sale, is perfectly understandable, but the game really shines in multiplayer. So thank you for listening and watching everybody, for I've been SocioPsycho, and I hope this has been of help to you, and I look forward to seeing you next time.